Controversy. President Trump says he is considering military action against Iran as tensions rise over the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. And a Fox News exclusive with emails disputing the Biden administration's claims about the 2022 Mar-a-Lago raid. But first, breaking tonight, the U.S. Supreme Court hands President Trump a major defeat. Justices ruling 6-3. The president does not have the authority to impose tariffs under emergency powers. President Trump says the justices who voted against him are, quote, a disgrace to our nation, fools and lapdogs for rhinos. And he is working on ways around the ruling. He says he'll have a solution. We have Fox News coverage. Peter Ducey has additional reaction to the decision from the White House. We begin tonight with Fox News Chief Legal Correspondent, anchor of Fox News Sunday, Shannon Breen. Good evening, Shannon.
Good evening, Brett. Well, the president says he is deeply disappointed in the court, but he's not deterred. And while he's moving forward with Plan B, he's not missing the opportunity to take some shots at the justices who did not rule in his favor today.
I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country.
Those harsh words aimed at two of the president's own Supreme Court nominees, along with the other four justices who joined them in finding the president does not have the power to levy tariffs under the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, or IEPA. Chief Justice John Roberts writing for the majority. The president asserts the extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration, and scope. He must identify clear congressional authorization to exercise it. Finding none, the majority concluded, we hold that IEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. One of the president's nominees, Justice Gorsuch, pointed to Congress as the rightful authority on something as sweeping as these tariffs. Quote, the day will come when those disappointed by today's result will appreciate the legislative process for the bulwark of liberty it is. Another one of the president's nominees, Justice Kavanaugh, disagreed with the court's finding and called out the majority for failing to spell out what happens next. Quote, the court says nothing today about whether, and if so, how, the government should go about returning the billions of dollars that it has collected from importers, but that process is likely to be a mess. The group that successfully represented a number of small businesses in this case says it'll establish a centralized database to help businesses navigate efforts to get refunds through the Court of International Trade and U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So we're still awaiting other rulings from the court on the boundaries of the president's executive power, including things like whether he can fire a member of the Federal Reserve Board. There's also the upcoming case on birthright citizenship. It's going to be argued April 1st, and we now know the president won't be in the courtroom because, Brett, he is scheduled to be in China.
Okay, Shannon, thank you. Let's take a closer look at how President Trump says he will pursue his tariff agenda despite today's ruling. Senior White House correspondent Peter Ducey is on the North Lawn with that part of the story. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. President Trump's tariff team nodded their heads in agreement as the president announced today that he has the legal authority to prevent America from getting ripped off by imposing different tariffs. And he says the Supreme Court can't stop him.
I want to be a good boy.
But now that the Supreme Court has ruled 6-3, the president can't have the tariffs he wants. He's imposing different ones.
Today I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff.
House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries writes the Supreme Court decision striking down the harmful Trump tariffs is a big victory for the American people.
Wrong.
And another crushing defeat for the wannabe king. On the contrary, according to the president.
It doesn't matter because we have very powerful alternatives that have been approved by this decision.
As news broke, the president was passed a note during a meeting with visiting governors.
It completely overshadowed, which in my opinion was getting ready to be a very productive meeting with the president.
Most of the president's ire is directed at justices in the majority, including two he appointed, Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch.
It's my opinion that the court has been swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think.
That court may have just given the president an exit ramp.
I think the president needs to actually listen to the Supreme Court and drop this.
Instead, he'll be doubling down despite an unresolved $175 billion question. There's about $175 billion in tariff revenue that is now in limbo. Do you have to refund $175 billion?
Think of it, Peter. Very fair question. They take months and months to write an opinion, and they don't even discuss that point. Wouldn't you think they would have put one sentence in there saying that keep the money or don't keep the money, right?
And the president thinks it's going to take several years to figure out if the United States owes anybody that $175 billion. But he is sticking with the tariffs, and he argues that a sign of tariff popularity came during a visit to a steel factory in Georgia yesterday, where the president says the owner wanted to kiss him. Brett?
Peter Ducey, live in the North Lawn. Peter, thanks. Please join Peter for the Sunday briefing at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. His guests include Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. Let's talk more about the U.S. Supreme Court ruling and the president's response to it with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Ambassador Greer, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here, Brett.
So tell me how this works. How are you going to get around this ruling as it's written?
Well, the ruling came down. It is what it is. We're very focused on using the alternative authorities that Congress has delegated to the president. The first one, which the president signaled today, comes under Section 122, which allows a 10% tariff to be imposed on a temporary basis. The president has that order. It's in the White House. I just looked at it and saw it, so I expect him to sign it shortly this evening. And then simultaneously, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative will initiate a number of investigations under Section 301 of unfair trading practices by a number of different countries to assess if we can impose tariffs on that basis, if we need to, if they don't resolve those issues. And of course, we have existing national security tariffs on autos, steel, aluminum, etc. So although the tools may change, the policy remains the same.
Yeah, so the sections you talk about are in statute. They're passed by Congress. They enabled the president to do this with a different mechanism to do it. But what happens to the tariffs that are in place, that you've already negotiated? I know you talked about the 10% that the president's signing tonight that goes into effect in coming days. That's across the globe. But what about the ones that have already been handed down from different countries?
Right, so we have negotiated a number of substantive trade deals, the most recent yesterday being a trade deal with Indonesia, where they agreed to lower all of their tariffs, all of their non-tariff barriers, etc. In each of these agreements, the other countries agreed to lower their tariffs and non-tariff barriers and cooperate with us on a number of areas, and that the United States has the right under those agreements to impose a tariff at a certain level. In the case of Malaysia or Cambodia, it's 19%, for example. And those agreements hold. Those agreements will remain. We'll honor them. We expect our trading partners to honor them. For a year, I've been telling them that regardless of the direction of this litigation, we will impose tariffs at levels that they agree to.
The biggest question I think I heard today, and the president started to address it, but really hasn't come to a conclusion, is how do you unwind some of this if companies come after you saying you owe me money? The coalition of over 800 small businesses calls for tariff refunds. A legal victory is meaningless without actual relief for the businesses that paid these tariffs. The administration's only responsible course of action now is to establish a fast, efficient, automatic refund process that returns tariff money to businesses that paid it. I mean, it sounds to me that this is going to be awfully messy and in courts for a long time.
Well, the courts have made this decision, and the courts are going to have to help figure out the process by which that might happen. As the president mentioned today, it's a matter for the courts. There'll be some litigation. There is some precedent in the past in other wide-ranging tariff cases where the Court of International Trade, which is a district-level court in the United States, had a hand in being very specific about the how and the when of those kinds of things. So we'll have to see how the courts want to deal with it.
The president's traveling to China next month, March 31st to April 2nd. Does this ruling somehow take a tool away from him in that leverage against China?
Thanks for asking that, Brett. This is an interesting question. On the one hand, the IEEPA tariffs and that tool have a lot of flexibility and different time restraints. That being said, we have existing tariffs on China under Section 301. We have an open Section 301 investigation on China. So the president retains a lot of leverage and a lot of ability to raise tariffs on China if necessary. And by the way, these are tariffs that have already gone through the courts and have largely been upheld. And so we feel very confident in their reliability.
You know, to that point, you mentioned IEPA, that's the emergency effort. Do you regret using IEPA if you had these other statutes already on the books and kind of ready to go?
No, not at all. And by the way, all of these options were presented to the president early on before he even started his second term. The reality is the president wanted to move quickly, he wanted to move flexibly, and most importantly, he was trying to respond to an emergency of our huge trade deficit we were left with under Biden. And so that's why he was using that. So it was an appropriate tool, it was a necessary tool. Obviously, we disagree, along with 3 esteemed justices of the Supreme Court on the result today. So we don't regret it. It helped us obtain tons of deals covering half of the world's population, opening up market access we haven't enjoyed for 30 years. And we have these agreements, and so we'll just use a different tool. Again, the tools may change, but the policy stays the same, and IEPA was part of that.
I know your job is numbers and trade and dealing with these countries, but on the politics of this, do you think that this hurts in the midterms somehow? Because the president has lost this legal battle in the Supreme Court, and now you have to kind of hustle to get everything back in place.
I don't think it will. Remember, the president ran on this his first term, and he won on this issue, who ran on it again. He was very clear during his campaign. He wanted to have a baseline global tariff of 10%, which we'll reestablish today. And he wanted to have higher tariffs on other countries who are bigger problems, and we'll conduct investigations to get to the bottom of that too. The reality is we're going with continuity here. We're going to recreate the system we have, contingent on the findings of our various investigations. And so we don't expect to see disruption. We expect to see continuity. We expect the countries to keep their agreements. So I think it's just going to be a continuous progress on the president's trade policy, which has been very successful.
Ambassador Greer, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now let's hear the other side for the political spectrum. Amy Klobuchar is a U.S. Senator from Minnesota. She is now running for governor. Senator Klobuchar, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brett.
What's your initial reading? You heard Ambassador Greer there and his take.
I have a lot of respect for Ambassador Greer. I was in the courtroom, and I was able to listen very carefully to those justices and knew and predicted this result, so I'm not surprised by it. What I am surprised by is that the president would use words like unpatriotic and saying that they are lapdogs about some of the most conservative justices that our country has ever known, which include, of course, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Amy Coney Barrett that he appointed, as well as, of course, Justice Roberts. And when I looked at this case, I just thought it is very clear from the trade court that heard it at the beginning, which included a Trump-appointed judge and a Reagan-appointed judge, that IEPA could not be used in this way. So while I understand and supported tariffs in the past to be used as an important with this statute and have done great harm for farmers in my state. One said it was a perfect storm of ugly, how his soybean market has dried up. Or small manufacturers that have ended up just being roadkill because they don't have the reserves to handle this. So the chaos this has created, changes over 100 times and the like, has done damage to our economy and particularly American consumers. Last estimate from one budget, the Yale Budget Lab, was $1,700 per American family last year.
You know, Senator, there are companies and people who look at tariffs differently. They see the upside to it. Even in Minnesota, a legendary Minnesota company benefiting from tariffs. Minnesota Star Tribune, copper tariff could help propose Twin Metals metal mine in Minnesota. Owner says. The United Steelworkers put out a statement saying that they hope that Congress will get involved and get back into this situation to lock everything in. So can you see it from that side as well?
I'm sure, and I have supported actually some of the tariffs regarding steel, but I do know the steelworkers were against how this was handled at the beginning, just because it was just so broad, and we've seen manufacturing jobs down 70,000 since the tariffs were first enacted. So what I hope comes out of this, that instead of doing more across-the-board tariffs, which I understand is going to assert the authority under Section 122, under that law, which has never been used. It started put in place in 1974, Brett. But the issue there is Congress can step in after 150 days and say, halt, this is making things worse. So what I would hope, instead of doing across-the-board tariffs again, that he would work with us to have a much more focused trade policy, to not treat our allies like Canada this way, forcing them to go to other markets and do business with other countries when it's been such an important trading partner, or use existing trade agreements like the USMCA, which I supported when President Trump, after it was negotiated, I think I was the first person, maybe you remember this, the Democrat on the presidential stage in our primary, that said that I supported the work that had been done on that agreement. And instead, we should be working through those processes and get new trade agreements, some of which Ambassador Greer pointed out have been negotiated across the world, instead of this constant negative rhetoric that has hurt our economy and these across-the-board sledgehammer tariffs, which has set back consumers and created more cost issues for so many Americans.
Yeah, Treasury Secretary Besson was asked this afternoon if these trade deals that have already been negotiated are going to stay intact and how it looks forward. Take a listen.
I think that everyone is going to honor their deal, and there is the draconian alternative that Supreme Court reaffirmed that the president has. He has a right to a complete embargo.
Right.
Like, he can just cut countries off. He can cut whole product lines off. We can't receive any money. So, I would call on all countries to honor their agreements and move forward.
They say this is a powerful tool that the president used to move countries to do different things. You say he needs to work with Congress to get it done.
Well, the Supreme Court has clearly ruled that he has to work with Congress, that Congress, as Justice Gorsuch pointed out a number of times in that oral argument, that Congress has the power to tax. And so, yes, he should work with Congress, but he also has to stop doing these things that are clearly illegal that then lead to complete chaos in the economy. And it's one of the reasons why people are so angry about what is going on right now. Because costs have been going up for people, housing costs. Continue, Brett. I didn't hear the question.
Oh, sorry. Do you think that people need to get refunds? There are some Democrats calling for refunds for the American people. Do you think they do?
So it is very clear. They made this retroactive. They didn't say, oh, it's just going forward. So there will be people, there's a lot of importers in the U.S., that's the bulk of it, that have paid these tariffs. And I would think these small businesses that have sued, a Utah fishing apparel company, a toy store in Pennsylvania, they are going to be going before the international court or some kind of body to get their money back. My hope is that that can go to individual consumers who ended up really paying for this because of the increased prices. But there will be major action on refunds. And, I don't run that White House, but I would hope they would be making that process go as smoothly as possible, because people will have a right to get their money back. There isn't a provision in the way the court did this, and the president did express his anger about that. I don't know how they could have suddenly come up with a process themselves where it says, hey, this is just going forward, it's not retroactive. I'm not sure they could do that under the law. The administration should have never used this IEPA statute. And I heard the ambassador say the president wanted to move quickly, and that was the goal. But you want to do things legally, or you're going to end up in a huge mess, which he has continued to have happen to him in various other realms throughout this administration. And what I care about is my soybean farmers in Minnesota, and a woman who runs a company called Busy Baby that, is just basically on her own there, that can hardly keep making it. What I care about is that they are able to do business in this great country that we live in, and I want to see us be able to have a stronger economy and not go backwards.
Well, Senator, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in.
It was great to be on, Brett. Thank you.
Up next, as President Trump says he is considering a military strike on Iran, we get an update on
Absolutely do not agree with her at all. Say it. They ought to finish that. clean up the corruption there in Minnesota and the fraud that's gone on.
It's got to be plant-based, it's got to be doctor recommended, and it's got to be Super Beets from humans.
Super Beets is the #1 cardiologist recommended beet brand for heart health support. With clinically studied.
President Trump confirms that he is, in fact, considering military action against Iran. This evening, we take a look at the military buildup in the Middle East as tensions increase over Iran's nuclear program. Here's Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin.
Mr. President, are you considering a limited military strike?
Iranian leaders have said any attack by the United States, limited or not, would cause them to unleash their vast missile arsenal at U.S. bases vulnerable to attack in Qatar, UAE, and Bahrain, home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. The Strait of Hormuz, at its narrowest point, is just 21 miles wide, and most of Iran's missiles are mobile. In the coming weeks, the U.S. could find itself in another Middle East war without a clear exit strategy. Squadrons of U.S. warplanes are now parked on tarmacs in Jordan. Today, the USS Ford aircraft carrier strike group passed through the Strait of Gibraltar into the Mediterranean. The daytime crossing of the world's largest and newest aircraft carrier suggests the U.S. military wanted this massive symbol of firepower to be seen. The president says there is a 10 to 15-day window for Iran to make a nuclear deal. Iran's foreign minister pushed back on reports that U.S. negotiators are pushing for zero enrichment.
We have not offered any suspension, and the U.S. side has not asked for zero enrichment. Yes, what we are now talking about is how to make sure that Iran's nuclear program, including enrichment, is peaceful.
Rafael Grossi, head of the UN nuclear watchdog, says the IAEA has not been able to access Iran's nuclear facilities since the U.S. bombed them in June.
They better negotiate a fair deal. I feel very badly for the people of Iran. They've lived in hell.
If there's no agreement, it's hard to imagine the president backing down from the military option. The amount of military hardware the Pentagon is positioning in the region signals it is not a question of if, but when. Brett?
Jennifer, thank you. Up next, Fox News exclusive, we have emails appearing to dispute directly the Biden administration's claim it was not involved in the 2022 raid on then former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. That's coming up. First, beyond our borders tonight, police searched the former home of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor again today. This comes one day after the former prince was arrested and held in custody for nearly 11 hours. He's suspected of misconduct in public office related to his friendship with the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Tens of thousands of Palestinians gather under heavy Israeli restrictions at a Jerusalem mosque compound for the first Friday prayers of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. The worshippers included some who were allowed to enter from the occupied West Bank. The Ramadan prayers at the mosque took place for the first time since a shaky ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas went into effect in October. And this is a live look at Spain, courtesy of EarthCam. One of the big stories there tonight, Barcelona's towering Sagrada Familia Basilica reaches its maximum height, though the magnum opus of the Catalan remains years away from completion. A crane placed on the upper arm of a cross atop the Tower of Jesus Christ, the church's soaring central piece, which now stands 566 feet above the city. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. Fox News exclusive, we have new information that appears to directly contradict the Biden administration's insistence it had nothing to do with the Justice Department investigations into then former President Trump's alleged retention of classified material and the subsequent raid on his Mar-a-Lago home. Correspondent David Spunt has details tonight. Good evening, David.
Brett, good evening to you. These emails obtained by Fox News paint a different picture of the relationship between the Biden White House and the Biden Justice Department. These two offices made it clear at the time, at least publicly, they were not connected and stayed away from any political interference. However, new emails obtained by Fox News from May 2022, 3 months before Mar-a-Lago was raided by the FBI, illustrates coordination between the White House counsel's office and the DOJ regarding an interview of Walt Nauta. Now remember, Walt Nauta is a current White House aide to President Trump, who was then former President Trump aid in Florida. Nada was later charged alongside Trump by special counsel Jack Smith. The May 10th, 2022 email reads in part, coordination with DOJ and White House counsel are in work to start the process to confirm and interview current administration employee Walt Nada. This event is dependent upon the timeline of President Biden's brief decision and coordination between White House counsel and DOJ, and in turn Evan Corcoran's position on the override of privilege assertion and whether or not he seeks an injunction to prevent access. That was written by an FBI agent, and Evan Corcoran, of course, one of Trump's lawyers at the time. This coming August, Brett, will mark 4 years since FBI agents raided Mar-a-Lago. A few days after that, then Attorney General Merrick Garland said this.
I personally approve the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter.
Shameful. Shameful.
Second, the department does not take such a decision lightly.
And we're getting new reaction to these emails. Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan in the House says in part, it's always worse than we thought. These newly released documents confirm that the Biden DOJ's raid on Mar-a-Lago was politically motivated. We're also hearing from Attorney General Pam Bondi. AG Bondi says the more we learn about the DOJ weaponization under the prior administration, the worse the story gets. And Brett, she says this right here, it's a key part. She says we will continue disclosing key evidence to our congressional partners to deliver the truth and bring those who committed crimes to justice.
Amen.
Coming from the Attorney General
They should be.
tonight. Brett.
Okay, we'll continue to follow it. David, thank you.
Thanks.
Fox Weather Alert now. The threat of a significant nor'easter snowstorm is increasing for millions this weekend across Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston metro areas. A number of factors must line up to produce blockbuster impacts, namely a slow and precise track along the northeast coast and enough cold air from Canada. Snow totals will be limited if any one of these forecast ingredients is missing, we're told. The primary snow window is expected to be Sunday night into Monday morning, potentially complicating the start of the work week commute. Out west now, detectives and agents searching for the mother of Today's Show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie continue to actively follow up on leads. Neighbors of the 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie have submitted surveillance video from that area. Investigators are carefully reviewing all of that footage. DNA analysis is underway on biological evidence recovered during the investigation. And officials say the 911 communications center continues to receive hundreds of calls each day related to this case. The nation's governors are meeting this weekend in Washington. Many of them spoke with President Trump today, but some of the weekend's activities are notable for who will not attend. Correspondent Mark Meredith explains tonight. Good evening, Mark.
Brett, good evening to you. Tonight, governors from both parties are praising a meeting they had with President Trump, calling it productive. That comes after a whole week of drama after the president chose not to invite 2 Democratic governors to a formal weekend event. This morning's breakfast happened at the White House, where we saw roughly 24 governors from both parties meet with the president as well as his cabinet. The event, though, was scaled back from years past after multiple governors protested Trump's decision to block Colorado's Jared Polis and Maryland's Wes Moore from a formal party tomorrow. Moore showed up for today's business breakfast, even as he and the president repeatedly attack each other publicly.
I thought we had very productive meetings over at the White House and had a chance to address many of the issues that the people of the state of Maryland are really focusing on.
The invitation controversy had overshadowed the start of the governor's conference, but organizers tell us they believe everyone is moving on. So the drama, it's now over?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I appreciate our Democratic colleagues who were there today. It was, look, the president was critical of Democratic policies, as he always is.
Multiple governors say Trump promised them he will not deploy federal immigration enforcement agents to their states like we saw in Minnesota without their permission. New York's Kathy Hochul saying it was a welcome surprise for her.
The president said we'll only go where we're wanted, and said, for example, I won't go to New York unless Kathy calls and says she wants me to come to New York. I took that as a very positive outcome from this meeting.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is not at this conference, but other potential 2028 presidential candidates are. I tried to get Governor Shapiro to weigh in on his future plans today, Brett. He did not take the bait. Brett.
Yeah, join the club. Thanks, Mark. Democrats have passed a new congressional map through the Virginia legislature. The redistricting aims to help their party win 4 more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. But yesterday, a judge in the conservative area in Southwest Virginia effectively blocked a voter referendum on the redrawn maps from happening on April 21st by granting a temporary restraining order. Up next, the panel on the Supreme Court's tariff ruling, plus winners and losers.
He wanted to have higher tariffs on other countries who are bigger problems, and we'll conduct investigations to get to the bottom of that.
I just thought it is very clear from the trade court that heard it at the beginning, which included a Trump-appointed judge and a Reagan-appointed judge, that IEPA could not be used in this way.
It's incorrect. Their decision's incorrect, but it doesn't matter because we have very powerful alternatives that have been approved by this decision.
Well, it was a big decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, 6-3, as you look at the justices in the majority and the justices in the dissent. Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh dissenting from this. The Washington Post writes it this way: Trump imposes new tariffs, denounces Supreme Court justices as a disgrace after ruling 6-3 decision. Justices had ruled the president did not have the authority under a 1977 Emergency Economic Powers Law to impose import levies on goods from nearly all of the nation's trading partners. In response, President Trump used a different law to impose a 10% across-the-board tariff, and we learned from the trade representative that he is signing that tonight. Let's bring in our panel. Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee congressman, co-host of The Five. Fox News contributor Hugh Hewitt. Yemisi Egbewale, former chief of staff and advisor to the Biden White House press office. And Trey Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina, host of Sunday Night in America with Trey Gowdy, an august group. Hugh, first to you.
Well, I want to quote Justice Gorsuch, Brett. It's an interesting turn of events. There were 7 opinions from 7 different justices. 2 were silent, Alito and Sotomayor. And the big picture, the thing people should take away, the court has ruled, the president accepted the ruling. That's not how authoritarians operate. That's certainly not how fascists operate. That's how a constitutional republic operates. Complicated statute, can't be used for the purposes for which it was tried. There are 4 other means by which to achieve tariffs. I just want everyone to take a step back and say what a wonderful republic we have, what an interesting and unusual way to decide things, and 7 opinions. It is an interesting turn of events, to quote Justice Gorsuch.
Yeah, Harold, the trade rep, Ambassador Greer, saying they are moving forward with these other efforts that Hugh talks about, different sections in statute already passed, but there are real questions.
Well, first, thanks for having me. Hugh and I went to the same law school, University of Michigan, and we both know Trey's a good lawyer himself too, but he's not a go bluer. This was a simple and straightforward case. This case was really the court saying the separation of powers has been violated. It was not against any particular president. I think Democrats need to be careful and show some restraint. We're not against tariffs. It's all the court said was the authority that President Trump used in imposing some of these tariffs. He didn't have that authority. He has to go to Congress to achieve that authority, to win that authority, because the Constitution clearly enumerates revenue-raising power to the Congress. I was a little curious to hear some today talk about the remedy. And the president was right. I was surprised the court didn't articulate clearly how in the path and the roadmap for a remedy here. But the remedy is pretty straightforward also. Whomever the government collected the money from at the border, they should reimburse that entity. If you and I go and we buy something we don't like and we return it, there's no concern or controversy or uncertainty about who the money should be returned to. Finally, the only thing I was disappointed in today as I listened to the president, and most presidents do this, when there's a Supreme Court decision that comes down they don't like, they lash out at the court. The court is not whom you should lash out at. If there's a lashing out, it should be the lash out should be directed at our framers. They drafted the greatest document in the history of the world. Did they get it all together right? No, but they left open opportunities and possibilities to correct it, which we've done over the many, many years of our country's 250 years in existence. Hurrah to the court, hurrah to the president for accepting it, and now let's move forward.
Let's listen to Peter Ducey's question about refunds and how you unwind this if there is an unwinding.
Do you have to refund $175 billion?
Thank you, Peter. Very fair question. They take months and months to write an opinion, and they don't even discuss that point. We've taken in hundreds of billions of dollars, not millions, hundreds of billions of dollars. And so I said, well, what happens to all the money that we took in? It wasn't discussed.
So, Trey, that is a question. You know, Treasury Secretary Bessent, the U.S. trade rep says, as far as the countries go, they've made their deals. They think they're going to uphold those. But for companies that have been paying these fees, tariffs, for consumers who may have been paying additional money, now there are people calling for money to be returned. And it sounds like there's going to be litigation for years.
Oh, there will be for sure. This is a jobs program for lawyers. But so we separate out the contracts, the trade agreements, those are off the table. Whoever paid Customs and Border that tariff, that's who's going to get the refund. I don't think it's going to trickle down to the consumers. I think the companies pick. Shein, for example, a Chinese fast fashion company, they paid a tariff, they will get the money back unless the president finds another vehicle and says, look, if you want to do business here, we're not going to refund it. I think everything is negotiable here. I think Stephenson Greer put his finger on it. Look, they didn't get to the destination the way they wanted to get to it, but there are other cars they can take to get to the same place.
Yeah, see, Democrats, on a political sense, I think have to be careful. Obviously, Senator Klobuchar said her piece. I checked, their soybeans did go up since the beginning of tariffs being in there. So they have to talk about it, to Harold's point, the right way, politics-wise, right?
Right, and the argument here isn't whether tariffs are good or bad, it's whether the president had the authority, and in some cases, tariffs are helpful. It was the way that the president did this that the Supreme Court disagreed with, the reasoning for it. But important to note for Democrats that there are certain American companies like Costco that filed a lawsuit in December that have taken issue with the president's stance on this. And if we're all running on the idea of affordability, well, then we have to look at how American companies that employ Americans and provide products that support American consumers are able to get their money back from this. I think, going back to Justice Kavanaugh's point, the refund issue is going to be the mess here. And so Democrats really have to make sure they stick to affordability and making sure American companies see those profits back.
All right, let's do some winners and losers around the horn. Hugh, winner then loser.
The big winner is Team USA, the women's hockey team led by Megan Keller. What an extraordinary shot. That was some Harry Potter stuff when that went in the net. So I love seeing them sing the national anthem with the absolutely full-throated approval for the flag. Great day. The loser, Foreign Minister Arashi of Iran. Rock and hard place. If he writes up a proposal the Ayatollah doesn't like, he gets a bullet in the head. If he writes up one that we don't like, the country gets bombed. He's in an absolute lose-lose position.
Tough spot. All right, Harold, winner or loser?
Mine's very simple and much lighter, but go men's hockey in the morning. My winner are those who like college basketball. We got the top 4 teams playing tomorrow. My Wolverines take on Duke in the evening, and Arizona takes on Houston at Houston in the afternoon. And my loser are those who don't like college basketball, because it's going to be a great day tomorrow.
All right, Yamasi, winner or loser?
My winner is Alyssa Liu winning for ice skating, and my loser is Japan. We have to protect Punch the Monkey and his orangutan plush toy.
All right, winner or loser, Trey?
My winner are the founding fathers who actually envisioned a legislative branch that would show up from time to time. My loser is Shanghai Steve Bannon, who made the news this week for advising a convicted sex offender who's on the registry and also talking about replacing then President Donald Trump. That's not a good look for a so-called MAGA star.
All right, guys, we made it through. Have a great weekend. Up next, Notable Quotables.